Yes. You would turn your Bibles to Psalm chapter 1, Psalm 116, starting verse 1. Psalm 116, starting verse 1. It says, I love the Lord, because he has heard my voice and my pleas for mercy, because he inclined his ear to me. Therefore I will call on him as long as I live. Being able to pray, having the opportunity to pray, is an amazing privilege. It's amazing to think that the God of the universe that created heaven, created earth, the tree that I'm looking at outside, everything you see around you allows me to communicate with him. And not only that, but he allows me to have a relationship with him. The God of the universe that created everything allows for me to talk to him. When you think about it deeply, that is an amazing thought. If you would, turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 7. This is Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus makes you, and he makes me, this promise. He says in verse 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks it will be opened. So Jesus promises me. He says if I ask, he's going to give me what I need. He's going to give me what's best for me. If I seek him, I'll find him. And if I knock, he's going to open the door. So God tells me that I should have confidence in prayer and confidence in this wonderful relationship that he has given to every human being. But if you're like me, it's really hard to believe that sometimes. It's really difficult to believe that there is a God in heaven who I can communicate with and who loves me. Sure, God tells me to have confidence in him, to have confidence in this mode of prayer, that this privilege that he's given to me. Yeah, he tells me to have confidence in him, but why? Why should I have confidence in somebody that I can't see, in somebody that I can't touch, somebody that I can't smell, somebody that I can't even, I can barely fathom his existence because he's so beyond me? How in the world am I supposed to have confidence in prayer? That's what I want to talk about tonight. Why should we have confidence in prayer? And like I said before, this is a very difficult thing that a lot of people struggle with. Why in the world should I have confidence in something that I can't see? And what I want to do tonight, I want to give you two things to take away with, and I'm going to talk about these. These are two things that I focus on whenever I'm struggling with this. Two things that I look to, and two things that really help me, and I hope they'll help you as well. The first thing that I do whenever I struggle with this idea of confidence in God, I focus on the idea, I tell myself that there is a God in heaven who loves me. And like I said before, it is so difficult to believe that he's really there and he really cares for me. So when I struggle in this way, what I do is I look at the beauty I see all around. I look at everything I see outside, everything that has been created by God. If you've ever looked under a microscope before, and maybe in a biology class or something, and seen a human cell, you've seen a wonderful creation of God. And if you studied the parts and components of a cell before, you'll quickly realize that a cell is like a tiny city inside of your body. And there's millions, billions, if not, I think trillions of these things inside of you. I'm not a biology major by any means, but there are some parts that I do know. There's the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. There's the nucleus, the brain, the control center of the cell. There's the cell membrane. There's lysosomes, ribosomes, the Golgi apparatus. There's so many intricate parts inside of this tiny organisms and there's millions, trillions of these things inside your body, and it's so interesting to note that if one of these parts inside of the cell did not exist, then the cell would cease to function. If the nucleus all of a sudden vanished, if the flagella, which propels the cell, all of a sudden just disappeared, the cell wouldn't have anywhere to go. It couldn't move. If the nucleus disappeared, it wouldn't have a control center. It wouldn't have a brain. It's almost as if the cell was designed like something. And also, if you've looked under a microscope before, you'll see, and if you've looked at DNA, you've looked at another wonder that God has made. I've got this quote. Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, said, "Human DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created." What would happen if Microsoft Word or another program that Bill Gates made, what if it just started to mutate randomly? The little design button and the page layout button just started going all over the screen everywhere, and it just started going haywire, and sparks started flying out. It would cease to function. And the same concept is applied to human beings. If your strand of DNA, if just a tiny part of that DNA is rearranged or taken out, then you would look a lot different. You would cease to function. Philosopher and apologist Frank Turek says, "Your genome is a message like your name and address, except it's written in DNA, and it's over 3 billion characters long. All of those letters, save a rare error, must be in the right order for you to survive." Now, the point I'm trying to make by all of this is if Microsoft Word had a designer, Bill Gates, then why in the world is it so hard to believe that somebody like you and me, which is far more complex than Microsoft Word, also had a designer? Charles Darwin, last quote I promise. Charles Darwin said, "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. But I can find no such case." Back in Darwin's day, Darwin had no idea about the complexity of the cell. He knew a cell existed, but he had no earthly clue about what it was and the intricate parts that I just described. And he didn't even know DNA existed. So it's quite possible to say that if Darwin had what we have today, he might not even believe in his own theory. And I don't mean to give you just a bunch of scientific facts. What I mean by that, and what I'm trying to communicate, is you can have confidence that there's a God in heaven, and He listens to you. And that's one of the things that I look to whenever I struggle with that. There's another thing that I do when I struggle that hopefully will help you as well, is I look at this book. The unity and the complexity of this book, the prophecies written in this book, written over a span of 1,500 years by 40 different authors. It's amazing. It's amazing if you read this book from Genesis to Revelation, from beginning all the way to end. It's amazing to see the unity that you find in this book. This book has one theme: the salvation of man through Jesus Christ. It all started in the Old Testament. The Old Testament's theme was somebody's coming. Somebody's coming to deliver you. In the Gospels, we see somebody's come. Somebody's here. And then throughout the rest of the book, we see somebody's coming back. It's amazing to see the unity of this book. And also, if you If you look at all the prophecies in the Old Testament that prophesy about the Messiah, it gives the mode of the Messiah's birth. It says in Isaiah, it says that Jesus, the Messiah, was supposed to be born of a virgin. It gives the place of his birth. I think in Micah, it says that the Messiah was supposed to be born in Bethlehem. It gives Isaiah gives a physical description of the Messiah, gives the Messiah's purpose, and it gives a physical description of the gruesome death and very accurate depiction of the death of the Messiah in both Isaiah and Psalms. Now, how in the world can somebody tell me that this book is not something special when it was written over a span of 1,500 years by 40 different people, all having one theme, one story, and one problem, which is sin? How in the world could somebody say that this book did not come from something special? I believe that there is a God in heaven, and I believe that that God loves you so much. And I believe that there's evidence that you can look to prove that, and that you can have confidence in the God that you pray to. The second thing that I do when I struggle with this is I focus on the promises that God has made. It's very difficult sometimes to trust people because I know in my life a lot of people have let me down before, and I have let a lot of people down. But God in His Word, if you read this, He has kept every promise that He has ever made. We read in Judges chapter 7 about the story of Gideon and the 300 guys that destroy this army of thousands, if you can remember reading that. Israel had, I think it was around 32,000 soldiers, and God said, "Okay, Gideon, I want to show you how powerful I am. I want you to tell your army, okay, if you are afraid, you can go home." So 22,000 people left. He had 10,000 people left. And God said, "That's still too much. That's still way too much." So He takes them down to a stream, and He says, "Okay, well, anybody that laps up water like a dog, separate them from the people that kneel down and drink water that way." And after that process, Gideon came up with 300 people. And with that number, with that 300 people, they defeated an army of thousands. And in Judges chapter 7, verse 9, God makes Gideon this promise. He says, "That same night the Lord said to him, 'Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand.'" God made a promise to Gideon, a promise that seemed unbelievable at the time. But like I said before, God always keeps His promises. Second example that I have, if you look at Abraham, in Genesis 15, God comes to him and says, "Okay, I'm going to give you as many descendants as you can count, as many as are in the stars in the sky. I'm going to give you so many children, so many descendants." And Abraham's an old man, and so is Sarah. How in the world are they supposed to have children? But God made a promise. God made a promise to Abraham. And in Genesis chapter 15, got a little marker. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 5, God says to Abraham, or Abram at that time, "And He brought him outside and said, 'Look toward heaven and number the stars if you are able to number them.' Then He said to him, 'So shall your offspring be.'" And God kept His promise. And you sitting here, you're the fulfillment of that promise. God always keeps His promises. Even though they might seem unbelievable, He always keeps the promises that He's made. So the question tonight, why should I have confidence in prayer? Why in the world should I believe in a God that I cannot see, that I cannot touch, that I cannot smell, that is not that is so far above me that I can't hardly fathom? How am I supposed to have confidence in a God like that? And how in the world am I supposed to have confidence that I can communicate with Him in prayer? Number one, there's a God in heaven who loves you. And if you don't believe that, look under a microscope. Look at the cell. Look at DNA. Look at this. Look at the unity of this book, the complexity of what is written in here, the prophecies made. This book, there's never been in human history ever written a book like this one. And the second thing, focus on the promises of God. God has kept every single promise that He has ever made throughout this book. I just told you two. He's made a lot more than that, and He's kept every single one of them. And God makes you the promise in Matthew chapter 7 that if you ask, He will give you what you need. If you seek Him, you will find Him. And if you knock, He will open the door. That's why I believe that we can have confidence in prayer.